It was a usual Friday night at first. As I walked up the pathway leading into the woods, I always took that path on my weekend hikes. Most times, my friends tagged along, but this time, I decided to go alone. I think I was angry about something, but I can't remember what. Anyway, the sky darkened as the sun neared the horizon. Going out hiking that late didn't seem too bad of an idea. I took a flashlight with me, and it was warm being in the middle of summer, so I didn't see the need to bring much else. A few other hikers came down the trail, but I didn't see any that were going up. The trail was easy, and I'd just eaten a little before, so I took to a strolling pace as the forest darkened with the lowering sun. The walking did help me calm down from whatever drove me there in the first place. I didn't think about taking anything that protected me from wildlife until the porcupine with bristles up to my waist meandered in front of my path. Now, they're fairly common in the area and mostly harmless if they're left alone. It only stopped me for a minute, and I bet the odds I wouldn't run into any mountain lions or any other wildlife. I shortly got to the massive rocks which the path led to and climbed to the top of one of them. It was a place that my friends and I would go to all the time to pass a few hours away from the world. And the sun crossed the horizon line right after I reached the top. And that was the first time that I felt as if someone watched me. A quick look at the forest floor and the rocks nearby revealed nothing. So I descended before the sky turned from orange-red to purple. And even though I intended to look at the stars, that feeling just made me want to leave and urged me to move. I walked at a faster pace, but even with the flashlight, the path seemed more difficult to navigate in the darkness. The sounds of the emerging night became louder with all the nocturnal animals and insects waking. Owls hooted in the distance, and crickets played their symphony. I tripped over a mound hidden in the shadows, and stopped my fall with both my hands and a foot. My wrist hurt, so I stayed still for a moment to make sure I hadn't broken a bone, but a twig snapped in the bushes and drew my attention away from my pain. The sound caused me to jump after snatching up my light. I didn't care to look before taking off. After running a moment, I looked back to nothing but trees and an animal trail. I laughed at myself, just assuming a deer or some animal had been startled by me. It didn't take me long before I started to notice that the path which I walked on wasn't the path that I needed to be on. None of the landmarks seemed familiar. Now, I knew most of the trails led back to the entrance, but some of them would be 3 or 4 times the length. So I turned around to go back to the rocks. And the feeling of being watched didn't go away, and I started to fret when I came to a split. I wasn't sure which one I'd come from. I shuffled in my pocket and pulled out a coin, then told myself that if it landed on heads, I would go right. If it were tails, I'd go left. When the coin hit the ground, it revealed the head of Abraham Lincoln. And so I went right, hoping that it would take me back. This direction began to take me uphill, but I knew it wasn't right, so I did turn back, trying to remain as calm as possible, still feeling the eyes burning into the back of my head, but I stayed calm. The split came again. This time I took the opposite direction. I could remember that the pain from my wrists began to draw my attention from the woods. I also tried to explain to myself that it was either an animal watching me as I walked by, or just my mind playing tricks on me since it was dark. I reached the part of the path which caused me to trip, and there I saw nor heard nothing, and so I continued. And when I finally reached the rocks, I noticed something protruding in the sky. A pair of deer antlers stuck up from the top of one of the rock piles. thought it was strange because the rock would be too far and too hard for a deer to climb or even jump. At first, I wanted to climb up and see it, but as I approached the rock, a pungent odor attacked my nostrils. And so, I thoughtfully chose the right path that time and proceeded to exit. And walking on the right path just didn't feel right. I felt watched again, and I listened for any strange noises. Something darted behind me across the path and into the bushes, but I didn't get a glimpse of it, only the rotting smell I came across by the rocks. I chose not to run but tried to move at a faster pace. My leg and wrists hurt from the fall and began to swell, making it harder, but I didn't want to see what sort of animal that smell belonged to. I wasn't sure if it was following me, but I didn't turn back to look. The smell didn't seem to go away, but it became fainter, and I figured I would be able to get to the exit before the animal caught back up to me. And I froze in my own footsteps when I walked upon a deer carcass. It sat directly in the middle of the path and appeared to have a cut throat. And then suddenly, a movement in the bushes caused me to turn, and I was met with a pair of yellow eyes peering at me. It startled me as it moved toward me with a sudden jerk, so I ran off into the forest, leaving the path behind and jumping over fallen logs and plants. And the deeper into the woods I ran, the stronger the putrid smell grew. I only stopped to try and get my directions straight when a ruffling noise from the trees forced me to run some more, just mindlessly into the woods, and before I realized it, I was lost again. In the very forest I hiked every week. I tried to think of what the yellow-eyed beast could be, and mountain lions seemed to be the only answer, but I don't believe that they're smart enough to set up a dead deer trap as I saw on the trail. The deer would explain the smell, but it filled a large portion of the forest, which seemed odd, unless the creature had several of them killed. I don't even know, do animals even go on murdering sprees? And rustling on both sides of me caused me to panic. But before I ran, I tried to shine my light on some of the moving bushes to see a small, human-like hand reach towards me. I didn't wait around much longer to see what the hand was attached to, and as I ran, my flashlight slipped from my hand. When it hit the ground, the light clicked off and it rolled into the foliage. It was nowhere to be found, and I could hear slight footsteps drawing near me. I left the flashlight and carried on, but not having a light source slowed me down as I searched for a path. I cursed at myself for deciding to leave my phone in the car. And then, I cursed at myself again as I stumbled over plants and sticks. Not knowing where I was running, I ran into a patch of thorny bushes, and it slowed me down drastically, and I cried out in pain when I felt something bite into the palm of my hand. When I looked to see the culprit, it had already disappeared into the thorn bush. When I looked at my hand, I tried not to get lightheaded, because blood was covering my hand and wrist. The thing I thought was odd about the bite is that it looked like pictures of shark bites, like a cookie cutter pierced into my palm. The overwhelming smell and movement in the thorn bush brought me back to my senses, and I stumbled through the bush trying to ignore the piercing thorns going through my shoes and legs. And I began thinking of stupid stuff, like the headlines that would be used in the newspapers when they found my body eaten by a small forest animal. And all my friends would make a joke out of my death and then continue to hike the woods without me. And I kicked through the bush a few times hoping to hit the little monster, but never made contact with anything but snagging vines, which tore at my skin and clothes. And once I got out of the thorny bush, I ran into the clearest sections between the trees. And a familiar sight filled my vision as I ran across the climbing rocks once more. I'm pretty sure that's when I started to get a little angry. I was too smart to let an animal outsmart me, so I grabbed the nearest stick that would break easily and climbed up to the top of my favorite rock. Even if it was a mountain lion, I figured if I kept to the high ground, I could defend myself until it left me alone. And if I had to, I would have waited there all night until the morning hikers arrived. Like a ninja holding a sword ready to strike, I waited on that rock. And nothing but the rotting smell met me at the top. I could still hear movement when I leaned over. I could see a shadow darting into the bushes. I shouted at it and tried to make a bunch of noise. I even threw fist-sized rocks at the trees and into the bushes. But only for a moment did it seem gone. At this point, my death seemed inevitable, and I got chills when the clouds blocked out the little remaining light. And I swear, I heard a chuckle come from the forest floor. Maybe I was having some sort of mental breakdown. I mean, I've had tests and they say I'm fine. I just didn't want to be there anymore. I shouted a few more times, then called out for help, hoping there would be some nighttime hikers nearby. Maybe some people smoking or drinking in the woods. Nobody called back in return, though. I traced out my path with a mental line, and then I jumped off the rock, trying not to hurt myself any further. I pushed through the pain in my leg and had momentarily forgotten about the bleeding bite mark, and sprinted, hoping my subconscious would avoid the things I could see in the darkness. The outline of the deer's body came up, and I jumped over it. And there was a second corpse on the ground, and this one didn't appear to be the outline of an animal, but a human body. My gut sank as I jumped over it and continued running. I knew I should have gone back to make sure, but it just seemed like a trap. As I ran, something ran along with me. Not in the path, but off the trail and just behind me. And the exit of the hiking trail neared, and the pursuing sounded louder, and I bolted for my car while fiddling to take the car keys from my pocket. Then I pushed the button and unlocked the door. When my car lights flashed from unlocking, the chasing sound stopped. It only took a second for me to get in my car and lock the doors. And there was a screwdriver in my glove compartment which I grabbed immediately, and then I caught my breath as I started the car. When I looked back to the forest, I noticed yellow eyes glistening with the returning moonlight. There were multiple of them. 6 or 7 pairs of eyes stared at me from the protection of the trees, which I watched for a moment. And they watched me. But when I raised my phone from its holder to take a picture or video, they vanished. I was lucky that I didn't get a speeding ticket that night because I'd never driven home so fast in my life. And the next day I told a few of my friends about it, and they convinced me to hike up with them to check it out. They said if there really was a body up there, then the police should know about it. I took a pocket knife and my grandfather's handgun just in case. But we couldn't find anything. There were no bodies, no blood trails, no yellow-eyed creature, and certainly no rancid smell. My friends still tease me about it, but I haven't gone hiking up there since. I haven't really gone hiking anywhere since. Though my friends say that the mark on my hand looked rather strange, they agreed with the doctor when he told me it was probably caused by the thorn bush when I was walking through it. I posted pictures of my palm and nobody could figure out what type of bite mark it was. So that's what happened to me when I went hiking alone. I couldn't find anything related to my story floating around the internet, so maybe someone can respond and tell me if this has happened before, or if I was just losing my mind in the middle of the woods at night.